welcome everybody to our speaker series, our monthly speaker series. Today we have Sly Lee. Sly is a first-generation American entrepreneur and scientist who is passionate about creating a positive global impact through design and exponential technologies. As the co-founder and CEO of Emerge, a cross-reality presence company, his team is building a platform that aims to enable a more meaningful, engaging, and diverse interactions in XR that brings us closer to the people that we care about. He is a Forbes 30 under 30 class of 2018 recipient, advisor to the Hydrous, a Singularity University Global Solutions Program 2015 alum, World Economic Forum Global Future Council member for AR and VR, and has presented at the Skoll World Forum and can be found surfing Venice Breakwaters most mornings. It's quite the introduction, Sly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jacob. That last point's the one I'm most proud of.
I
enjoy the most.
No surprises there. I think all of us kind of, really are proud of our hobbies and kind of, like to embody our passions. So, no shocker.
Well said.
So Sly, tomorrow you guys are officially launching your first product at VentureBeat's GameSpeed Summit. Take me through the journey, going from starting the company to where you are today. What are some of the biggest milestones and challenges that you guys kind of faced?
Well, the company started in 2015, and it's interesting if you walk back. Someone asked me today, what was the first 30-second, what was the first elevator pitch? 6.5 years ago. What is it compared to what it is now? The vision is the same, actually very similar, if not word for word. There's some words that are plastered on our office wall here that says, we believe in a future where distance and time don't stand in the way of feeling present. That's been the same sentence we crafted 6.5 years ago, and it's maintained the same driving force behind the company. What has changed significantly since then, obviously, is how we're achieving the goal along the way. We really were interested in the sense of touch at the time and still are, and we've really evolved our thinking as we've seen how just user engagement and consumer engagement has changed online, especially in this last 2 years during the pandemic of virtual, everything being virtual. I would say that there's been an amazing journey starting with just Isaac, Mauricio, and myself as co-founders that lived together for the first 2 years in the same house, now to having a team of 40 people, mostly in the US, but actually distributed, has been an amazing journey so far. And we're really grateful to have people that supported us really early on when it was just a concept and we had no freaking idea how we would build it. People backed us, and we're really eternally grateful for those people. And now we're excited to launch this thing together.
That's awesome. So I guess for everybody to give an introduction into what Emerge is.
Emerge is building a platform for touch in the metaverse. When we unpack what that sentence means, how we've been able to do that is we've created a physical device that creates the sense of touch using ultrasound. So we are creating literally force fields in your home that enable you to feel something that's not virtually there. And the beauty of this design is that it does not require you to physically put anything on. You don't have to hold a controller. You don't have to have a glove, no haptic suit. And it works in a variety of contexts. We are specifically really interested in a lot of the existing devices that are out in market today, such as AR and VR headsets. But in the future, we see this device that we've created really expanding and potentially becoming a new type of interface and new category of device that you might buy in your home to fulfill all of your immersive and virtual needs. Just like you buy televisions and screens to fill out your home, you buy surround sound speakers to fill your audio needs. In the future, we think that there's going to be a new market for essentially enabling touch in a variety of contexts. And we hope to be one of them, if not the leading platform.
So tell me about why you think adding touch to the metaverse is so important and kind of why is that kind of the North Star for the company?
Yeah, adding touch into the metaverse, I would say is more obvious now than it was 6 years ago. it was definitely an uphill battle when we started the company, trying to convince investors why this was needed. It's interesting because when we talk to people, like our own friends, our own family, it was very obvious it was needed. But I think the line between what some investors like to call a vitamin or a painkiller, it's pretty blurry, to be honest. And I think that shifted dramatically within the pandemic, what is considered nice to have versus must have. I think at the time, people underestimated how important mental health is and how that truly is a must have, a need to have, not a vitamin. In many ways, meditation and other mental wellness practices are seen as a nice to have or a vitamin, but those are needed more now than ever. So when we think about the need for touch and the importance in this next era, we think about it even outside the context of what we describe as the metaverse. When you look back the last 200 years, we went from the first digitized virtual communication device, which was the telegraph, 1830. We're now in not even 2030. So that's less than 200 years. We went from the first digital signal to now the metaverse and now emerging Web 3.0. So if you look at what happened in those 200 years, we went from essentially blips and dots and dashes to real-time audio to real-time visual, and humans have 5 senses. And it's very clear that touch is so important in our daily lives and even just how we go about our day. And it's been, I think, even more clear for the world how important it is to stay connected with people. There's been these phrases tossed around: co-presence, social wellness, that have been adopted by all the big 5, 6 tech companies of the world now. And I think people are realizing that when you talk about co-presence, if you leave out the sense of touch, then you're missing a huge part of the equation. And so, we're fortunate that I think it seems like a very clear need now, touch in the metaverse. It hasn't always been that way, but we are lucky, I think, and fortunate on the timing of when we're building and launching this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty apparent for anybody who's been observing venture-backed businesses that timing is, of the utmost importance. So it's good to hear that you have that on your side. It's also kind of apparent that this technology has a lot of different potential use cases. As with almost everything that's being discussed in the metaverse, gaming becomes kind of one of the first to come to mind. What's the use case that's really most exciting and most dynamic in your mind, and kind of the one that you hope to develop?
The most exciting use case to me personally is what the phrase gaming will be probably a year or 2 from now. In the past, I've been very hesitant to say it's gaming is the first use case, because the definition and people's understanding of what a game is was very different 5 years ago than it is today. Today, how people view games, I think, would be a really great explanation of what we're doing first, because in many classic games, there is no win-lose. The goal is not to score points or win a certain round, but more just to hang out and be present with somebody else, share an experience. I like the word play a lot. Roblox is a great example. In many of the games, there is no clear win or lose. You're really part of this community and hanging out with your friends. And so I would say that gaming is very squarely within what we are addressing and enabling with our first product. And then when we fast forward into the future, the use cases that I get more excited about are still perhaps within that same thread of gaming, but I think the definition, like I mentioned, of gaming is going to get changed, become very different in a year or 2 years from now than it is currently. What does it mean when you can see someone in holographic form right next to me, and I can reach out and physically give them a high five, and then we start playing virtual chess and we're feeling the chess pieces, and then that person goes away afterwards? I wouldn't necessarily consider the game itself as the endpoint, the game of chess, but there's something in between about sharing that moment together.
And I think that kind of transitions nicely into one of the next topics that I wanted to get into. This idea of evolving games and how games are kind of changing really ties into a concept that VCs love to talk about, and that's TAM. What is the total addressable market? And it seems like this vision of gaming is one that is much more inclusive, something that has a lot lower barrier to entry. It's something that you can pick up really easily and not feel intimidated by virtual goblins trying to kill you and take your coins. So tell me a little bit about how you guys are thinking about your TAM and kind of, what are the conversations around that?
It's pretty interesting. In the past, when we talked to VCs around TAM, we've had two different types of reactions. And as Reid Hoffman says, whenever you get varying reactions that are polarizing, that's a good sign you're onto something. When people have very extreme reactions, we've had reactions where people don't understand the opportunity and they think it's too niche, touch virtually. And then we've had other people that align with our vision, which is it's almost too massive. It encompasses everyone in the world, 8 billion people that seeking touch in some virtual way. Obviously, I'm biased and fall more in the latter camp. In terms of actual product and business model, however, we are being very explicit in who we are addressing in terms of the need and the product. If you look at VR as a case study, as an example of one of the markets we're very interested in, we anticipated 9 million people last year to be using VR on a daily, weekly, monthly basis for some social purposes. This is in contrast of solo VR gamers. That 9 million number was actually published recently by this company called National Research Group. And so that was a number we were anticipating as well. What happened with Quest 2 sales, however, of last quarter, it blew everyone's expectations out of the water, including our own team. And some of our teams actually from Facebook, Facebook Gaming and Oculus. We anticipated they would sell 5 million Quest 2s. They sold 10 million. And our number was seen as very optimistic, actually. And so when we think about that TAM and the average user within that uses VR has a broader spending habit of around $1,000. So they spend money on VR, around $211 on VR content a year. People that are using VR very, very actively. People spend money on other gadgets and electronics throughout the year. We think that there is a sizable enough market to address today. And in terms of the future, we haven't been so obsessed with trying to project the TAM in terms of the greatest opportunity, because I think it's maybe a little arm wavy. And I also think that a lot of projections fail to account for the fact that the pie is expanding. Even that metaverse, that number that you shared, the 800 million market size number projected, I think they projected by 2024. Even that number, I think a year ago was like substantially lower, but because the definition of the metaverse has since expanded, it's expanded the pool and the potential TAM as well. But we do think about hardware specifically, because that is obviously one aspect of what we're building. And you can actually build some very strong cases around hardware and the fact that I was just talking today about the future of hardware in the metaverse and how a lot of the contentious debates today, and even lawsuits, I mean, if you look at Epic versus Apple, are around the fact that one of those companies controls a hardware platform. And at the end of the day, software is eating the world, but software runs on silicon. And whoever has a hardware platform is both the bottleneck and the enabler. And so we're really interested, if we do our job right, we potentially could have a new enabler of interaction in the metaverse.
So just kind of explain that out. Like when you guys are talking about hardware as kind of an enabler, but also a bottleneck, there's obviously like a developer community that kind of needs to evolve around Emerge. So, have you guys kind of already started those efforts? What is kind of the thinking around how you guys are going to try and really grow that community of developers and kind of encourage innovation on the Emerge platform?
There's been a chicken and the egg scenario that we faced, as every company faces that attempts to create a new platform, which is content versus developers, and not being able to attract the developers without the content / funding, but not being able to create that content / achieve funding without the developer base. How people in the past have done it is with really big pockets. If you look at how much money Facebook pumped into the Oculus Quest or the Oculus platform, just in terms of content, even just last year, it's astronomical and far greater than any startup could put into a device on their own. And so how we've decided to address that problem is, well, one, we knew that we were creating a new user interface that has the potential to create multiple new languages of interaction. That has some complexity just built in naturally. Two is the chicken and the egg problem that I just mentioned. So what we've done is we've selected a few developers and have worked with them extremely closely, like hand in hand, and made sure that they get what they need to develop their own content. We're essentially funding content for the first year, like paying for it out of pocket. But in that way, we can make sure that all the incentives are aligned and we have the best experience possible within our content in Emerge Home. Moving forward, we have been building relationships as well with other larger studios that we hope would be interested in integrating with us in the future. So 5 years from now, what success would look like from a content perspective would be, and developer perspective, is any time that you want to interact in a virtual setting meaning AR, VR, holograms, your TV even, that work has been done on the back end, and those partnerships and integrations have been made with our developers and partners.
So I think there's kind of an interesting, inflow of news that kind of helps back your case here. One is that Google has announced their plans to ship a VR headset by 2024. And the other was the recent acquisition that Microsoft announced of Activision. So on some level, activity around this space has only been kind of growing louder and louder. How do you guys think about that? Is that something that you guys look at and you say, this is validation for us? Or is it more of like we're keeping our heads down, we're trying to develop this product, make it the best it can. And by now development is kind of past and you guys are thinking about conversations about marketing. But, curious to hear, what your reaction is to these kinds of news items.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jacob, actually, in that I think it is tempting in this space, and increasingly more so, to see some of the projections and analyses and get really caught up in the hype. And we've been very wary and cautious, even in the beginning, to not assume too much. We've been very cognizantly and purposely building towards products we know are already out there, are coming very, very soon, rather than speculation. If you even look back at 2015, when we started the company, we purposely did not call our company Emerge VR, even though at the time, any company that had the title VR in the name got funded. But we believed in the long term of the industry and what was happening. So if you look at even companies like Apple, where there's been speculation and some pseudo confirmations of them building two different types of headsets, we don't know when they're going to ship a device. I constantly hear varying updated expectations of announcing it this year, no, and then it's next year, or then it's the quarter after that. What's really exciting is that just even today, with the install base of just take Quest alone, that's a pretty sizable market. And the way we look at it is, there's enough here to keep our heads down on, and enough exciting potential that's coming where we see it as inevitable. If you take console gaming as an analogy, which we did as an exercise last year, each console gaming platform ships around 100 million and seen a success. PlayStation 4 has shipped 120 million units over 7 years. Typically, the first 2 years you sell 1 million or 2 million, and then it goes very predictably towards the 100 million number. If you look at Quest, that number was triple with the Quest 1, and now with the Quest 2, I haven't even gone back and rerun those numbers, but it must be like 5x, maybe even 10x faster the first year of sales. So I anticipate, just ballpark, in the next, say, 2-3 years, we'll probably see an install base of 100-200 million headsets cross between AR, VR. When you get to those numbers, it starts to get really interesting with regard to developers and even brands to get involved, studios, and they already are in some cases now.
So I want to kind of switch tack here and move on to kind of a topic about company building and what it's like to be the CEO of now a venture-backed business that is growing quite fast in a really interesting area of emerging tech. One of the facts that I found really interesting on your slide deck is that 70% of the team is currently made up of immigrants or first-generation Americans. Has this been kind of like an explicit corporate value that you knew that you were trying to instill, or is this something that has just kind of evolved over time and has become a pride point for you guys?
I really appreciate that you pointed that out, Jacob. Not many people actually touch upon that point, but we're pretty proud of that number. Um, Obviously, we can always do better, and it's something we're actually very cognizant about is increasing the number of women that are in our company. But whether or not it was intentional to attract immigrants and first generation Americans to the company, it wasn't ever a line item that we sought in interviews. But I think by nature of the vision, and we've always been a very intentional company of we're building this for human connection, even though this could be used in a plethora of different use cases. We've always said the killer use case and what we're interested in is bringing people together. That's just resonated past. And I'll say that what it's like to be a co-CEO. Isaac's actually my co-CEO of
Excuse me.
what's that?
I said, excuse me.
No, it's all good. Is that there's so much to do. We're building a company with quite a lot of inherent complexity. I would also say an inherent upside as well if we succeed in our execution. We're building hardware, building software. We're in this field of acoustics, which is super nuanced, and we have a team of physicists that are brilliant. And we've also built/are building a new sensor, and all within a market that is still no one can really define in the metaverse. So there's a lot to do with Emerge and being a co-CEO at this company. But the beauty of having the dynamic Isaac and I have together is we can divide and conquer. And if we achieve success in these areas, then this could be a very valuable business, we believe.
So, how do you think about hiring with kind of all of this in mind? It sounds like you have all of these kind of amazing physicists and really highly technical people, but you also have this kind of core company value of inclusivity and kind of trying to bring people together. How difficult is it for you to find talent, retain talent with kind of everything going on around that discussion? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to lie. One of the challenges currently now is hiring, in that there's some really big players out there throwing a lot of money around. In some cases, paying double the annual salary of what is kind of market standard. For us, though, we've fared better, I would say, than some of our other friends' companies, in that when that happens, it could be a pro in that it's a sort of a weeding out process. The people that come on board to our company are very aligned with the mission, very startup minded, and want to make a real impact. There's tremendous upside here at our company, whereas I would say a company like Facebook, I don't know if a lot could be said with regard to company shares at Facebook. They're a huge company. 2/3 of the world use their products, if not maybe more than that. So I would say hiring is definitely a challenge, specifically in even just like Unity developers. I'm seeing all our friends' companies are seeing that across the board. But we're fortunate that we've decided to stick with our vision and mission, and that's attracted certain caliber of talent and people.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, there is a degree of self-selection when you kind of have this very, I would say, like expansive mission as well as, hardware vision. Um, Moving on to more of, about you, Sly, the entrepreneur, the kind of individual. You've told this incredible story in the past about your kind of non-traditional grandparents and family structure and how growing up in Mississippi really shaped your vision of technology and kind of how technology can be used to help the world. Would you mind sharing that with kind of the people that are watching and joining us now?
Absolutely. It's funny that the fact that I grew up in a deep South state in Mississippi, you don't find a lot of technologists from Mississippi. And the fact that my parents immigrated there from Singapore also made that childhood very interesting. My grandparents are this beautiful couple in the South that ended up adopting my parents at church, because my parents didn't know anyone when they came to the country. And they in turn became my honorary grandparents. My grandma is a really powerful communion gatherer, one of the first women chemists in the state, and just this brilliant thinker and activist, and did a lot of work actually to integrate schools during her kids growing up, even though that era should have had all integrated schools and activities. She was really pioneering that. So I think a lot of my upbringing in a pretty rural area, and then subsequently working in developing countries for 3 years, shaped a lot of how I think about technology, the role of technology in design, and the fact that I am an optimist, but I'm not a tech utopian optimist, in that I think there are a lot of dangers to technology depending on how it's designed, and design can bring out the best of our nature and humanity and society, or it can bring out the worst. And so I think it's pretty important, that topic. And that's one reason actually Isaac, Mauricio, and I, we made the decision to move from Silicon Valley to LA years ago. Actually, even before the company turned 1 year old, we moved to LA because we really wanted to blend and build the company and blend together technology, but also culture.
Got it. If you weren't the CEO of a startup, what would you be doing right now?
Such a fun question. I ask this question sometimes when we interview people ourselves. And I always wondered, what is my favorite version of the answer? When I'm interviewing people, I don't really have a favorite version of this. I feel very confident in what we're doing, what I'm doing daily. And I don't have any questions, mostly because I lived a former life already. And I think maybe that's a little unique than most of maybe tech startup founders. I was a marine biologist for 3 years and lived in a leprosy colony on Molokai. And for years, scuba dive, collecting coral reef samples and fish and water quality. I started a nonprofit that really pushed the envelope of photogrammetry underwater, combining 3D mapping, photos, LiDAR, sonar. Got funded by a few tech companies. And then I traveled to 8 different countries in 3 years and ran expeditions in each one of those countries, lived a month of my life underwater. And so in some ways, I feel like I already had another life, which has been fantastic. There is another thing that I will start to blend. I don't have to wait in that. It's also very beneficial for our product when I think about it, is with regard to music. So I love music and I play a few instruments myself, and I love performing as well, but I've always wanted to be in a band. So maybe I should that's in the metaverse that plays other instruments. We start a band together. But the concept of music with regard to touch is really interesting if you think about the word synesthesia, and how a lot of what we're doing at Emerge is truly blending different senses and having the end goal or the end interpretation or end experience be almost a completely new version of what you can experience just with one sense alone, or what you can experience in this reality. So yeah, I'm excited about what we're doing in our mission at Emerge, and I think it's a great place, and it's a great vehicle, the product that we've built to really manifest a lot of passions that I have personally, a lot of passions our team members have, because it's sort of blue ocean. We're creating the fundamental technology and the platform, and then so much can be built on top of it.
And I guess, like, as a last question from my end, we've spent a couple of hours together over Zoom just chatting about Emerge, and kind of, me asking you to do this for us. But you've always displayed this kind of incredible relaxed aura, right? And one thing that kind of sticks out about it is the vision of a founder is usually accompanied by somebody who's frantically running around with their hair on fire, trying to constantly go from team to team, ship, a product, put out different fires. So have you always kind of been like this, or has this been something that you've explicitly tried to develop over time?
there's a great pill you can take for this. No, I'm just no. That's a very insightful question, Jacob. In that, that's something I think I'm still trying to learn and improve. The propensity of a founder early stage to just put out all the fires and do all the things later and build a very strong team. That transition, has not been easy for sure. But I think spending the time to empower people that you hire to do the job that better than you is really key. And I have a great network of family members and advisors and co-founders and my co-CEO that balances me really well. We're like truly like a yin yang in terms of relationship. There's a few sayings that really stuck with me that just helped me channel that. I definitely still am prone to action rather than prone to contemplation, but I'm actively trying to work on the contemplation side, despite, maybe my outward demeanor. I like the phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And there's so many decisions that have to be made on a day-to-day basis, but truly there's only maybe 5 decisions that have to be made on a quarter basis that really change the future of the company. So I do try to focus a lot of my time on those 5 questions.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yes.
I think, so that's a pretty good place for us to cut the live and kind of move on to any sort of Q&A that our audience might have. So we're going to open up the portion of the webinar now for anybody who would like to type a question to Sly, and kind of let's see what our audience has to, is curious about, wants to learn more about. So guys, feel free to send a question in the chat, and Sly, if there's anything that's particularly odious to you, don't respond to it.
Okay. Pretty easy going.
Right. Anything coming in, guys? Right. Well, for now, if there's no questions coming in, let's here we go. What do you see in the future for Emerge? Do you think incorporating the sense of smell or texture is really something that can be expected in the near future?
Mm-hmm.
From anonymous attendee.
I think about the future of Emerge in a few phases or epochs. In the 5, 10, 15-year future of Emerge, the resolution of the tactile product we're creating will get better and better. And even the sensor that we've developed will unlock capabilities that are not possible now. And to be honest, we don't know how far we can go in terms of creating something as fine as texture. We're not really focused on texture today for the reasons I already mentioned, but it's possible in the next, say, 10 years or 15 years. However, it might not be needed. And I say that because we're very interested in, I'm always cognizant of what are the other technologies that are being built simultaneously to ours. Brain-computer interfaces are really interesting. If you think about, and how we think about the human experience on our product is that it all happens here. Your hands are just interfaces, just conduits, and touch is a conduit to the end experience, which happens in your brain. We think about the ultimate vision in Emerge in the future, like Emerge will be successful, is if we can build multiple products that advance society and our ability to connect across distance and on the same order of magnitude as the past 200 years that I mentioned earlier, from telegraph to the metaverse today. From today with the Emerge device to 200 years from now, what does that look like? It won't be touch. It'll actually be something else. But however we can progress and enable another level of like meaningful connection, that's how I see Emerge creating a legacy and what type of company I want us to be.
Great. I see one hand up from Jem. Jem, I'm gonna, let you unmute here.
Sure. Hi, this was very, very interesting. But my question is about the same line as the previous question in a way. You know, assuming that we are all hypnotic, when we believe in something we see, say on an image or virtually, we need to really emotionally get involved in it, kind of like self-hypnosis in a way. So for let's say for a headset to be successful, to be so widespread, how much do you think the people will be able to buy into that? In other words, be able to self-hypnosis yourself to really immerse yourself into such thing as a hologram or something. And is this also a generational thing? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. Got a few questions in here. I'm going to attempt to answer both. I heard one, which is, are the headsets going to be widely adopted? And then is this a generational thing? I've never been a fan of wearables and just in general. The headsets I do see as a wearable, and it is pretty high friction to put this thing on your face. And specifically with VR, you cut off access to the real world. You're not teleporting to this other world. I do see it as very high friction. I don't think that's the end state. I don't think it's going to be massively adopted in the same order of magnitude as the iPhone. It will be, I think, massively adopted on some lesser magnitude. I don't know what that's going to be, but I'm not too concerned because I see, and I actually, even Facebook themselves sees VR as a stepping stone. I think they know the inherent constrictions and limitations of the hardware being on someone's face. Immense technical challenges, societal challenges as well as use case challenges. So the holographic vision that we've been promised for years of seeing a hologram just appear out of thin air, like in Star Wars, for instance, it is coming. I've seen firsthand some prototypes and even products that are on the market in very limited capability. But it is coming. I would say in maybe 10 years, like mass consumer holograms that are life size and very low friction and don't require like a giant compressor or giant compute power and very expensive. In the meantime, I do think that the wearables, the headsets, even AR glasses can sustain a large enough market to enable companies like us to live and even thrive. Because, I mean, you're seeing this now that so much has been elevated by the pandemic and also by companies' focus and very intentful focus and dollars being spent in the space. I mean, when Facebook changed the name to Meta, I think some people saw it as just like a frivolous name thing, but a marketing stunt. But the fact that they put so much money behind that endeavor and shifted the organization around that was a big sign, I think, to the market. And we subsequently saw a lot of VCs change their perspective as a result.
Thank you, Jim, for the question, and thanks for that answer, Sly. Any other questions?
Last thing, the generational thing. That was a good question, because I'm really interested in Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is, I think, 11 and under.
Oh God.
It's the coolest generation name. I'm really jealous that they got to be called Alpha. I think there definitely is a generational constraint, perhaps, or propensity to adopt technology. What I haven't figured out yet is that if the older generations are always going to be as have so much friction to adopting a new technology, a new platform, as say when Gen Z or whenever my generation, the millennials, become 60, are we going to be just as against adopting new technology? That's unclear. That is very unclear. But what is clear is that Gen Z already is going to drive major economies. That's why so many people are focused on them.
I mean, it's apparent just by kind of, seeing how different types of products have emerged over the course of the past year or even 3 years, if you want to go back before pandemic, and kind of how much of the stuff that is being adopted in kind of mainstream tech right now was largely driven by Gen Z. I think about stuff like TikTok and even people following their favorite YouTube creators. A couple of years ago, turning into the entire thesis about the creator economy now. So I think it's definitely prescient.
Absolutely.
Well, Sly, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and it's always a pleasure to sit down and chat. Hoping at some point in the near future we can meet in person and maybe ditch the metaverse for a couple of hours.
That sounds great, Jacob. Thanks for having me here. Good to see you.
Yep. See you, Sly.
Take care. Bye.